Blog Talk Radio.
All right, good evening, everybody, and welcome to Golf Talk Live. I'm your host, Ted Odorico, and we've got a great show for you tonight, the 17th of August, another Thursday evening show, and we're going to start things off here in just a few moments with another great round of Coach's Corner. I've got my panel all ready and waiting here in the wings, and a little bit later on in the show, I'm going to be joined by a PGA professional and owner of the James Kyle Golf Academy, of course, James Kyle, and joining him is going to be the founder and developer of AimPoint Golf, Mark Sweeney, on the second half of the show, so you want to make sure you stick around for that. Of course, if you're listening to the show, you know how to find us, but for those that maybe have just sort of come by happenstance, let me just fill everybody in on how you can find the show. Go to blogtalkradio.com, and up in the search key, just type Golf Talk Live, and that will take you to the main page. And we are live Thursday evenings from 6 to 8 p.m. Central, or 7 to 9 for those of you on the East Coast, and that's 4 to 6 p.m. On Pacific time for those of you that are on the West Coast. For some reason, if you can't join us during the live broadcast, not to worry. Just go to that link, blogtalkradio.com/Golf Talk Live, and just scroll down a little bit on the page. You'll see the on-demand section, and that's where all of the previously aired programs are sitting in their entirety. So if you can't join us live tonight, or maybe you weren't able to catch last week's show, you can just go to the on-demand section and listen there. For some of you that maybe like a little different platform, for instance, if you like going to iTunes or even Stitcher.com, you can go to either of those, and under the podcast section, you can just look again for Golf Talk Live, and you can listen on either of those platforms as well. So lots of ways to find us. Of course, I update everything on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and of course on my LinkedIn page, so you can always find the shows there. My Twitter handle, by the way, is Ted and Buck CEO, and that's CEO in capital letters. So you can find me there, and thank you for all of the recent followers on Twitter. As I said, I've got a great show for you tonight. Going to be joined by three great professionals, Paul Kaster, Mike Fay, and Bill Abrams. And let me just tell you a little bit about them, and then I'm going to bring them on so we can get right into our discussion, because we got some meat in the discussion today. So I want to make sure that I give these guys ample opportunity to talk about it. As I said, Paul Kaster is on the show. He's a golf coach and director of instruction at Forsgate Country Clubs. He's also a member of the Proponent Group, the premier network of golf instructors and coaches. He's also TPI and K-Vest certified, and a national staff member for the Seymour Putter Institute. Mike Fay also on the show, and he's the PGA director of player performance at the BOYNE Golf Academy. He's got 20-plus experience as a teacher professional, and it's easy to see why Mike has become a leader in the world of golf instruction. Very smart and very knowledgeable about the business, everything from cutting-edge social networking techniques to having a mobile app. He's also helped change the face of teaching golf. Plus, he's the host of the Mike Fay Golf Show, so you want to make sure you tune in for that, and we'll ask him about that in a few moments. And last but not least, rounding out the panel, of course, is Bill Abrams. He's a PGA professional and the owner and director of instruction of Golf Solutions Academy at the Balmoral Woods Crate in Illinois, and the Carolina Club in Margate, Florida. He's a 2015 Illinois PGA Professional of the Year and the 2015 and 16 Golf Range Association of America Top 50 Growth of the Game Teacher. He's also U.S. Kids Golf Top 50 Master Teacher, and as he puts it, he specializes in making players smile, and that's what we're all about here on the show. Guys, welcome to the Coach's Corner panel here on Golf Talk Live.
Thanks for having us,
Ted.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks.
Boy, I'll tell you guys got a lot to get out in your bios here, and that's just the short version. I hate to see the long version. You guys have well-deserved and well-earned accolades, that's for sure. Guys, as I told you off the air, and by the way, just to I just want to touch real briefly. Unfortunately, we were having a discussion. I'm not going to get into it now. We'll save that for another show. But just as a couple of you there were getting into some of your comments, we went live on the show. So we'll carry that discussion another time. But tonight we're going to talk on the Coach's Corner panel. We're going to talk about common swing faults, and there's a lot of them. We're going to try and get through as many as we can tonight. And for those of you tuning in live on the broadcast here tonight, we want to make sure that you really pay attention, because a lot of the ones we're going to talk about here are very, very common. So, guys, I'm just going to read out an opening statement here, and then we're going to get right into the questions here. Most amateur golfers, of course, have some form of a swing fault. These can be caused mainly by physical limitations in the body, which can create an improper or inefficient swing pattern. The most simple swing fault can cause a loss, everything from a loss of distance to consistency, as well as put you, the golfer, at risk for injury. And one of the first ones that we're going to talk about, guys, is what's referred to as the S posture. And I'm going to give you just a little description on that and a little bit of some of the physical causes of that, and then we're going to get into discussing a little bit more in detail. The S posture is basically a swing characteristic caused by a golfer creating too much arch in their lower back while in their setup position. So if you can visualize for somebody that's in their address position, essentially they're going to start with a little bit of a curvature in their shoulders. In other words, they're going to have sort of a rounded shoulder, and then more commonly what happens is they get their glutes or their butt muscles arching out too much, and it creates sort of an inward indentation in their lower back. So if you look at it from the side or down the line view, it's kind of that S-looking posture. Some of the physical causes is, of course, muscle imbalance. The lower cross syndrome is often referred to, and it's simply a grouping of weak muscles combined with overactive or tight muscles that create a predictable movement pattern in the lower back. And this pattern can, of course, lead to injury if it's repeated. So I want to start, Bill, with you on this discussion. Obviously, this is a posture that's not conducive to making good golf swings. Is this something that you've seen a lot with some of your students, with some of your high handicap amateurs, and what do you try to do to help them alleviate that?
Yeah, a few things is, we definitely have to go into a physical screen, as you said, with TPI and the trainers I work with when we have an acute issue like that. But I feel some of that S posture has come over the years, too, with the old adage of sticking your rear end out. And that, at times,
right, people
over-exaggerate that, and then it gets them into an awkward position. One of the things that I'll mention to them is feel like they tuck the rear end or get it underneath them a little bit more, and that will flatten the back out just a little bit, because that S posture has a horrible effect on balance. It has on weight shift and everything down the line. It just can create such a huge problem for people. It basically makes the things immobile that need to be mobile, and the things that need to be a little bit more structured in the body and giving them a little bit more stability, it takes them and moves them away.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. Mike, I want to jump to you next, just keeping on this theme for just a second or two more, and then I want to move on, because I know we've got a lot of things to talk about, and obviously we don't want to get too repetitive. One of the things that and just sort of for a side note, guys, a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about, I've done intentionally just to kind of see how it affected me. In other words, I've put myself in that S posture just to see obviously what it looks like, but how it inhibits. One of the things that I noticed with this, Mike, is that it really inhibited my swing, both in the backswing and also in the downswing, in order to maintain, because obviously we want to, as best we can, maintain your posture throughout the swing. When you get into an incorrect posture, it can inhibit a lot of your swing movements. What do you, again, in your opinion, what do you try to do to help people alleviate that? And have you noticed this with some of your students as well?
Yeah, more often I see when we're talking about S posture versus C posture, but S posture, Phil's right. We've been taught to stick your butt way out, and what ends up happening is that our abdominal muscles aren't sucked in enough, and then it turns into S posture, and we can't turn, and we end up moving sideways too much in the golf swing. And that causes lots of problems. I mean, you could feel it too, Ted, right? You can't move when you're stuck like that. And inhibits, moving the legs and everything. So, I see it a lot in better players. correcting that and fixing that and getting them to tuck their butt up underneath there so that they can actually move better. So it's good.
Yeah, and Paul, just real quickly and touch on this a little bit. Mike just raised a very interesting point that a lot of people don't realize. The ab muscles can affect posture, obviously, a lot as well. If people have very weak ab muscles, they tend to overcompensate in other ways, and by sticking their rear, as Mike and Bill just pointed out, a little bit too far out there, if the ab muscles are weak and not able to support that, it's only going to be exacerbated. So is there anything that we can do or advise some of our students to maybe do to, one, avoid getting into this and maybe strengthening those core muscles a little bit that will help keep them in a better posture? Paul?
Yeah, sure. I think feeling like your abs are just kind of mildly engaged, I guess, is a good way to put it. Over the golf ball is a good thing. You know, it's a good practice to feel like you're taking the club away with your chest and abs, kind of. And so they have to be engaged and they have to be strong enough. And so doing crunches on your own, you know, if you can do, 50 on a daily basis, you're going to be a better golfer. Just something as simple as that. I think there are lots of more complicated exercises that you could get into. But just, something that simple is going to make you swing the golf club better. It's going to make you feel more stable over the golf ball. It'll probably even make you feel better when you're putting, because making sure that your abs are engaged in your putting posture is also really important to make sure that you feel nice and stable.
Right. Well said, guys, by the way. And this moves in, Mike, and I'm going to jump to you next, and then on our next question, Paul, I'll go to you. This brings us, of course, to the C posture. Mike, you had mentioned this as well. And this is just for the folks that maybe aren't familiar with that, and obviously we don't have the ability for a visual here. This occurs when the shoulders, as I mentioned earlier, are kind of slumped forward at address, and there's a definite roundness to the back from the tailbone to the back and neck. So it kind of gives you that look, again, down the line look of a C. And this, of course, will more often not force players to keep their backswing very short and wide, or otherwise they'll find it very difficult to maintain that posture. So obviously some of the physical causes of a C posture can simply be a result of poor setup position and be corrected with physically adjusting the posture to a more neutral spine. Majority of C postures are caused by a series of muscle imbalances and joint restrictions that develop over years. So this is something, Mike, would you agree, certainly can happen with anybody, but more often not maybe in some of our older golfers that have lost some of the flexibility and kind of get into that slumped over posture. Obviously, this is something I know that you've seen. What do you recommend for this, and what is some of your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I see it a lot. I see it not just with older people, but with people that work at a desk. And
yes,
their arms are way out in front of them, and their scapula is pulled apart, and there's stuff like that, and they do that all day long, right? So, it's very, very important to, take a break when you're at your desk and actually try and pull your scapula back and pull your chest up and get it back there, because, we watch it. I mean, people walk like that too. It's not just in golf, because they're always stuck like that in their daily lives. So when I bring it up to people like that and talk about that kind of stuff, and then start to give them exercises to open up their chest, try and get them to stand up taller and bring it up to them, because to be honest with you, most of them don't even know they're doing it. And, like you were saying, some of the things that can happen, arms run into the chest too fast, they stand up, they move too much to the side, they can't get a big enough backswing because they just don't have the room to do it. So, bring it to people's attention like that. It really, really helps in getting them into a better spine angle at address.
Right. Well said. Paul, I think one of the other issues here, and obviously this applies to all of them. Of course, we want to have good core muscles, but one of the things that I think happens with those folks that have C posture issues as opposed to S posture is, again, as Mike put, they're at a desk maybe a lot now, with many of us that work on computers a lot during the day. they develop that sort of roundedness and outstretched arms as it is. And so a lot of the muscles in the shoulders and upper back, if you will, become very weak and loose and not, not very, create a bad posture even without getting into the golf positions. So obviously some exercises are in order. What other things do you suggest to the folks out there that might be listening and maybe suffer from the same type of issue? Paul?
Oh, I think you have to know where you should be and what a proper posture should feel like. So simple way of doing that would be to stand up straight up and down with your feet shoulder width apart. Hold a club basically like right against your face, right under your nose. Hold it against your chest, and then with one hand, and then bend over and let the club go right through your legs and kind of get in the address posture. And if you can touch kind of the top of your knee with your other hand, you're bent over the right amount. And with the club up the front of your body like that, it's going to have a tendency to kind of straighten your spine out. And so for for a lot of people for the first time who have C posture, they'll feel what they should, what a proper posture should feel like with their shoulders back in a better alignment. That's a posture exercise that KVS developed. And then
right.
I think, rolling out the upper back with like a foam roller or using some tennis balls, taped together or something like that. I think a foam roller is really great. But putting basically most of your weight lying on your back, putting most of your weight on a foam roller and kind of rolling it up and down the upper part of your back between your shoulder blades. If you have C posture, it's going to tend to loosen up a lot of the tightness in that region, that's the thoracic region of your spine, and that tends to be what causes the curvature.
Right. Well said, and some great tips. Bill, obviously there's some folks out there that can't get into a good posture and often get into that C posture, not just as the other two gentlemen talked about, whether it be that they're working, at a desk all day, but also maybe they're a little out of shape. There's some guys out there, let's face it, that got a little bit too much around the midsection, and a lot of times they have to get into kind of a funky looking posture in order just to be comfortable. And we don't want to certainly offend our students, but sometimes we have to have an honest dialogue with them. What do you do in a case like that?
Well, one of the things we have to be able to allow them to identify what's going on. I found it's pretty practical to have them feel like their head stays on top of their spine a little bit. As we know, if your head, with that C posture, your head and your chin starts to dip into your chest. I'll have the player say, they'll set up that way. I say, take a very deep breath. And it's very difficult for them. I'll have them come up a little bit where their head gets more on top of the spine, and that 17-pound weight, once it gets back in position and balance, it makes the breathing easier. So I think the first thing is when they're aware of it and can identify it, then we can start to address it. And that's, to me, is a real simple way to do it. And just that simple idea, with folks that, they may not go through a physical training or whatever, but to get them to at least a position where it doesn't, with that C posture, how much with that head down inhibits the weight shift, the balance. I mean, just go up and down the stack of things that we need to do well. It pretty much has a bad influence on just about everything. But just that little simple tip of taking a breath, and you can do that yourself. Put your chin in your chest, take a deep breath, and then put your head more back on top of your spine and take a deep breath, and it feels entirely different. Yeah,
you're exactly right. And Bill, a lot of folks you'll see will actually fall into a bad posture because their head is too far into their chest. They've got their chin down into their chest, and conversely, the rest of the spine sort of tilts in order to compensate, and again, you get that sort of a C posture. Great answers, guys, and I just want to touch very quickly on this last one here, and then I want to get into some other areas, some other common swing faults, and this is actually, I think, Mike, you actually touched on this a little bit in one of your answers, but an actual loss of posture. And simply what that means is any sort of significant alteration from the body's original setup angles during the golf swing. So you've gotten into a good position, but somewhere in your swing, more often than not, it happens in the backswing. We've seen this all too often. The golfer will stand up. And a lot of times, I think what happens is it's a lack of flexibility. The golfer has muscles are too tight in a lot of areas, especially in the glutes and the legs. Quite often are very, very tight, or maybe even in the lower back. So in order to alleviate that pressure, they're going to stand up. And obviously, in the downswing, they've now got to lower their posture in order to be able to make contact with the ball. And depending on how the club face, if it's lagging too far behind, or if they've snapped it shut, can result in all kinds of things. So I don't want to get into a big discussion unless any of you have anything you want to add to that. But that's, I think, pretty much safe to say that that's really summarized sort of the loss of posture is when we sort of come out of the posture, either up or down, and some of the things that can ultimately happen. Anyone want to jump in and add anything further on that? Or are we good?
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. You could probably add early extension to that in some ways, but no, I like that. I mean, I think the most common backswing fault you see is people coming up and out of their posture, I think.
Yeah, and I think there's a myriad of reasons why that happens, but more often than not, again, it's most people come out of a posture because they're uncomfortable. It's not because they choose to do it or necessarily bad swing mechanics. It's usually because it's to compensate for something that's not feeling right. So if they stand up, it's because there's a tightness that they're trying to alleviate the pressure, and a lot of times they come out of that posture. All right, Paul, we're going to start with you on this one here, and this is over the top, a very, very common, as really probably the most common swing fault among high handicap golfers. It usually is because of the overdominance of the upper body during the downswing, and as a result, the club is thrown outside of the intended swing plane, and when the club is sort of approaching the ball in and then out in motion, it creates a pull if the club face is square or a slice if the club face is open. So this swing fault can cause a tremendous loss of power and limit one's ability to control the ball flight. Some of the physical causes, of course, is inability to separate movements of the lower body from the upper body, and doesn't allow the lower body to lead the golf swing as it should. So, and again, usually reduced spinal and hip mobility causes this sort of limited pelvis to thorax separation. So, talk a little bit about more about the over the top. I know I've given you the general view, Paul, and then we'll continue our conversation.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's very, very common. I think a lot of times you see it with players who come out of their posture in the backswing and go into flat shoulder plane, meaning they turn, sometimes trying to get a little bit more turn because they've heard that could be helpful, and then they kind of come out of their posture. Their shoulders, instead of turning on kind of an inclined plane, are turning now much more flat, almost like horizontal. And from there really is no, it's much, much harder for them to turn back into the golf ball and get their lower body going first. And the natural reaction is to kind of throw the golf club out with their right shoulder in their hand. And I think a lot of times that backswing situation will create the downswing. A lot of times also it's just a very tight grip or regripping the club at the top of the backswing. And, a lot of golfers feel like they can still generate a little bit more power by kind of grabbing the golf club at the very top. And what we know about the kinematic sequence is that if you do that and you tighten up your hands, it kind of ruins the order in which your body has to sequence itself back into impact. So grip pressure is very important, trying to keep your hands as kind of as soft as they can be while still maintaining control of the golf club. And I think for a lot of players feeling like they're turning their front shoulder down when they take their backswing, those two things help a lot of people kind of set the table for a better downswing.
Yeah, I agree. Bill, one of the other things too, and I know Paul touched a little bit on this as well. Obviously coming out of the posture is a definite recipe for coming over the top, but also a lot of players, that overswing in their backswing. Maybe they need to make a little more compact of a backswing. They get over anxious, I guess, or overzealous in their backswing, and they're wrapping themselves up like a top, and then obviously the body can only move in a certain way, and if they get over extended, if you will, and then trying to come back in, a lot of times their body can only move one way, and it forces that trailing shoulder out, and conversely their arms will follow coming over the top. Talk about your experiences with some of your students, if you will, and is there anything specific that you like to do to help some of your golfers get away from coming over the top?
Yeah, you hit on that pretty well. What I find a lot is, there's a couple root causes that I see. The weight starts getting outside the trail leg. On a right-handed player, that would be the right. I prefer to see them stay inside the inside line of spikes on their shoe. The weight shift and it keeps the center of pressure in a better position there. I always say, too, it almost feels like a player, once they break that brace or so, the weight goes to the outside of the trail foot. Then it all breaks loose. The arms start to try to create all the speed coming down and square the club, and there's just no way that they can do it efficiently. And that's the biggest key that I see a lot. At times, too, I'll even have a player, they'll get too narrow, which will facilitate that poor motion. I have them widen up just a little bit. It'll feel like their swing shortens, and they get into that right side and are able to, brace a little better and have something to push off of and keep the club from pathing out and across. And, the body track has helped us immensely explain this to people and show them the trace with it would be going from the, say, the trail toe to the lead heel where they're cutting across the ball that way. The weight will actually, even the center of pressure will go that direction too. We'll see that on many occasions. So when we can show them the way that the weight needs to shift and the center of pressure needs to move, it opens their eyes up immensely, where they'll feel like a little bit more on the trails, on the backswing. They load low into the trail side and then spring up into the front side, and that prevents that motion completely. And it's coming out of that posture, straightening up on the way back. There's no way you can do that. Yeah,
because every action has an opposite reaction, and this is what we've tried to explain here is if you're coming out of your posture, in other words, if you're standing up, as we've all talked about. When you're coming into the downswing, well, obviously you can't stand up more. You have to come down. And, if you've – I had a student, and I mentioned this a while back on one of the shows, where, I videotaped him right from the get-go, and just because he wanted to see what things we're looking at. And as soon as I saw it, there was a building in the background, probably maybe about 100 yards away, and the way he was set up in his posture – the roof line was actually at the top of his head. So I sort of used that as a reference point. And what was interesting is, now obviously he wasn't physically doing this, but his head actually moved the equivalent of 6 inches above that roof line of that building in his backswing. And then, of course, in his follow-through, he actually, well, yeah, you're not kidding. And then he actually moved, when he came into his downswing, he not only recapped the 6 inches, but then he actually went 2 inches below the roof line in through impact. Now, he actually hit the ball, so his head actually moved, in theory, moved 8 inches. And, this is not an older guy. He's pretty young. He's probably in his late 30s, so he's still got some flexibility. Well, when I showed him that video, he was actually surprised. Because he didn't think, he said, I knew I'd come out a little bit, but he said, I never realized that much. And, of course, he was coming over the top and, all kinds of mishits. We know all the drills that happen when somebody does that. But a lot of people don't realize, and I want to go back just a little bit very quickly and sort of recap, and I don't know whether you guys do this or encourage your students to do this, but I want to talk just very quickly about the posture again. I think one of the things that I do personally, and I recommend to all of my students that I work with, is if you don't have one, go out and get one. You can get one very cheaply. I talked about this on Tuesday's show. get yourself a mirror. I say roughly about 5 to 6 feet tall and at least about 2 feet wide. You can go to any Home Depot or any of your Lowe's or something, whatever equivalent is in your area, and just have them throw a cheap frame around it so that you don't cut yourself if you don't have one in your house. And what I try to do myself, because I've got one here in my place, is I practice getting into my posture, and I practice all the different positions that looking at a mirror so that I can make sure I'm doing everything correct. And you'd be surprised at how many people don't realize what they're doing incorrectly because they can't see it. And I don't know what, guys, please chime in, but do you guys do anything? I mean, I know we shoot video and we show them the video and that, but when people are away from the home, do you guys encourage anybody to if they've got a mirror, to do setups like that as well, or what? Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. Mirror work is so important, especially when we're trying to fix address posture and things like that, ball position. Being able to see it, we can show them pictures and we show them on the, on the phone, or we have gears and things like that here at BOYNE. But, highly encourage them to get in front of the mirror and see what's going on. What does it feel like versus what it looks like? And making that change, sometimes takes time, for sure. Yeah.
And Bill, what about yourself? Do you encourage that as well? I mean, obviously anything that we can do to help our students, but I think as Mike just pointed out, I think it's a great way, and I know from my own personal experience, using a mirror and doing some of these drills and setting up in the posture and even going through the full swing and just watching the positions through a mirror does just a myriad of good for my golf game. What about you, and what do you recommend for your students?
Yeah, I do a lot of things setup-wise with players, utilizing at home and mirrors away from the course and on the course. One of the things that I use a ton to really focus in on the balance and stability is having them practice their posture by closing their eyes. As soon as you close your eyes, if you're leaning left, leaning right, on the heels, on the toes, or in a compromised position, or even an S posture position, for instance, or a C posture, you'll feel it very quickly, because once your eyes take away from focusing on a spot, you have to strictly be on flying on instruments, for better or worse. And that's one of the things I really focus on with players, is to have little drills that we can do at home sometimes that will be posture, whether it's using a mirror, practicing standing on one leg when you're in the kitchen doing things of that nature that really help them get a better awareness of where they need to be, stability, balance-wise, and ultimately posture-wise.
Yeah. Paul, something that I used to do as well, is I remember years ago when Nick Faldo shot one of his first videos with David Ledbetter when he was still working with David. And, he would talk about posture, and he'd set down all the, all the sticks and things to show the alignment and things like that. And this, of course, was before DVDs. This was still VHS. So I would pause when he would get into that perfect position, and I would actually get just a thin piece of masking tape, and I would just run it from ground to the top of his head, and I would just imitate where that went through, and the club shaft and so forth like that. So there's a lot of different things. What about your students, Paul? Do you try to encourage people to do, as Bill and Mike have said, things at home when they're away from the golf course, like using a mirror or using some other instrument to be able to pattern themselves with some good fundamentals?
Yeah, absolutely. So I use K-Player and K-Best, obviously, but K-Player is kind of like a training unit that my students have access to help them learn and get some biofeedback to learn proper posture and setup positions. But when they're at home, I mean, just like what you just said, I was thinking that while listening to you guys talk about this, creating basically like a framework on a mirror with tape, and so that every time you set up kind of to the sideways, looking to your right at the mirror, and your posture is basically repeated every single time the correct way. It's very quick, easy way to do it. It really only takes maybe 5-10 minutes a day of doing something like that, and you're going to get that reinforcement that you need to create a habit. So mirror work's very important. Using phones, everybody loves their phone these days. We have all kinds of devices that we can use to hold a phone on a golf bag or on an alignment rod and get some feedback while you're hitting golf balls too. And as long as you kind of recreate the lines that you put on your mirror, you can do that with, any of the apps that are out there that allow you to draw lines on video. So you could definitely take that to the range.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. I don't know how many times in on social media we see everybody taking a selfie. Well, what a great selfie to do is, shoot yourself out on the golf course or at the practice tee, and do your own video. And there's all kinds of products out there that can help you do that, and apps, as you said, Paul, as well, that can help you do some of these things. And really nowadays, guys, there's no excuse for players not being able to get access to. There's a wealth of information. I know all of you guys have websites and or academies, or you're working for premium organizations where you have access to some of the best tools in the business. So there's really no excuse that your students can't utilize this. It's just a matter of them, making the time to do so. And there's a lot of great tips, as we've all talked about, that they can do even in their own home. So even if they can't make it out to your facility maybe this week, there's some things that you can give them to work on at home. Mike, I want to jump back to you on this one. I think it's your turn. And the sway, I know we've touched a little bit about that, but the sway, of course, is an excessive lower body lateral movement away from the target during the backswing, and, of course, forcing that weight on the outside of the back.
You there? Ted?
Ted, you there?
I know. I don't hear him.
Okay. I'm back.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me? Hello?
Ted, I'm here.
I got you.
Bill. Yep.
Okay. Can you hear me now, guys?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened there. Anyways, Mike, the question was to you, and we were talking about swaying. Just talk a little bit about that, the lateral movement, obviously in the backswing, some of the problems that it causes, and what you try to do to help your students fix a situation like that.
Yeah, swaying is tough. It's not a lot of fun. One of the biggest problems is that it moves the bottom of your swing too far behind the golf ball. So one of the ways that I work with my players with TPI is learning how to turn the right hip better, trying to keep the weight more centered in their golf swing. And, a lot of times we find that it's physical limitations through TPI that's the reason why they do this stuff with a slide. Not a lot of fun, causes all kinds of problems. So just getting them to rotate their hips in the backswing to keep their weight more centered and their center of pressure more in the middle of their body, it definitely helps for sure.
Yeah, and Bill, swaying I found certainly can happen for anybody, but particularly tall players. I'm very tall. I'm 6'4", got a lot of length in my legs. So I'm prone to naturally a little bit of a sway, and a slight sway I guess is okay. A little bit of lateral movement is okay as long as it's minimal, but it has to be mixed with the right amount of hip rotation or turn, if you will. And as Mike just pointed out, when you get too much of a sway and you get onto the outside of that back foot, then you're asking for all kinds of problems, and that moves into what we refer to as the slide, having to literally laterally move again just to come back to where the ball is. Talk a little bit about that, and is there any tricks or techniques, if you will, that you try to help your golfers with to avoid either the swaying or sliding of their lower bodies?
Well, I've got that tall thing covered because I beat you by about 1.25 inches. So I'm
Yeah.
talking of what I know.
Right.
I really see one of the things that we try to do is really keep the lower body a little more braced, and we do this with stance width. Also, when we're showing video, when the legs are coming straight down, sometimes that allows the weight to get over. I really focus on players engaging the ground on the inner spikes of both shoes. When they can feel that ground engage, the likelihood that the weight gets outside that right foot, it really helps things immensely. And I find that at times it becomes a bit of an issue. When a player gets a little bit narrow, or they try to do a little bit too much. If they can engage that, and almost to the point where they're a little knock-kneed, to get that feeling of how the weight actually will shift and it doesn't get outside the right foot. I'll put an alignment stick down on a right-handed player right on the ground on the right foot, and have them set the foot right on top of the middle of it, and just have them focus on where's it rolling over, where's it staying inside. And when they do that, it helps get that sway out of there and gives them a little bit more coil so they can get back through the ball much more efficiently. And that that's when you get the hips start sliding outside, and I really start with the ground first and try to build up to help them prevent that from happening.
Yeah, well said, Paul. I want to just get into another a common swing fault here, just because we've got a few more here to get through, and I'm just being mindful of the time. But is the reverse spine angle, and this is really has been categorized as really the number one cause of lower back pain in golfers. And just a very quick synopsis is the reverse spine angle is an excessive upper body backward bend or excessive lateral upper body bend during the backswing, which of course makes it difficult to start downswing in the proper sequence. This is a biggie, and really physical cause is really the ability to separate the upper body from the lower body and allow the shoulders to rotate around the spine without going into a backward bend. So talk a little bit about that, Paul, and what we can do to avoid that.
Well, it definitely creates a lot of problems in the golf swing, and on top of kind of robbing players of power, makes injuries much, much more likely. So I think, in terms of the appearance of what you want to see with with people, you're looking at between 5 and 10 degrees of rearward tilt. I think at the top of the backswing is a good general guideline. Again, there are things like K-Vest that can really give you a great sense of how this should feel, or gears for that matter. Mike's got gears, of what the proper amount of shoulder bend should be at the top of the backswing. But a simple one would be, put your head against the wall, put your arms across your shoulders, and make a very just kind of a compact turn. You should not feel your head going to the left, and some people do, and that's an indication that you're in reverse spine angle at the top of your backswing.
Right.
So, feeling like your shoulders are turning more over your right foot, or for a right-handed player, over your trail foot, I should say, and getting that sense that you're getting a little bit more behind the golf ball would be a good place to start.
Yeah, and the thing that you have to be careful, and that's a great tip, because the thing you have to be careful of is what we were just talking about, and this is where a lot of golfers, they and Bill, you talked about this in the beginning about people getting their butt out a little bit too much. Well, the same thing happens here in this particular movement. Is a lot of golfers here, okay, well, I've got to sort of turn and get myself over that trail foot, and instead of actually turning into that position, they actually make a lateral movement. And don't actually really turn very much at all, but they just move themselves into that position, and that's another problem in itself. But what do you see in your teaching that can maybe help a little bit with some of the golfers that maybe are doing that reverse spine angle?
Yeah, and what we get is, that's really a huge issue with a lot of players. Trying to keep their head down, trying to keep it too still in front of the ball. It really creates some big issues, and that is a killer. One of the ways I try to explain it to players is get a sense that your spine is vertical to the ground, roughly speaking, and your hips are parallel to the ground. So we basically have perpendicular lines from your hips to your spine, maintaining that through the swing, in other words. So your trail side stays higher through the shot as opposed to, extending on the way back and then compacting on the way through, because what that does is it gets you into that position. And, by simply explaining it to players that way, a lot of times it catches them the right way, so they're really not thinking so much about any other motion. It's keeping themselves in a position that they're not going to compromise their back and still be able to get plenty of speed moving through the ball.
Yeah, I agree. Well said. Mike, I want to jump into the next one with you, if you don't mind. Just again to avoid being repetitive on this. Probably, if I would have thought this would have matched up with the number one swing fault, but I think this is probably number two for sure, and that's it's actually got three names. It's referred to obviously as casting, an early release, or even scooping the ball. They all refer to, of course, the premature release of the wrist angles during a downswing and through impact, much like as it's referred to casting of a fishing rod. Myriad of issues can happen. Talk about this beast, if you will, and what are some drills or things that you do to try and help some of your golfers prevent this?
Yeah, casting and scooping. You're right, with the handle going backward when you hit. It's tough. A lot of times I'll take players when they have this kind of problem and take them over to the short game area and work on it that way. Help them make smaller swings so that they can feel like their hands are more in front of the ball when they hit shots. I think sometimes scooping goes right along with, reverse weight shift or hanging back at the same time. So,
yep.
Those kinds of things, all of it kind of works together with each other, right? So that, and I see sometimes early extension too at the same time, and they swing the club across their body and scoop it. So more often than not, we don't see casting and scooping with a really good club path, usually to the left.
No.
For a right-handed player.
Right.
Right. And like we talked about earlier, these things, you're right. They work together. So if you have C posture, you're going to be doing that. It's very difficult to get the golf club to be coming from the inside unless you stand up, and then you bring in all kinds of other problems too. So, short game definitely helps with the casting and scooping. If we can use the front of our, shorter wedges instead of the bounce so much, definitely help. Yeah.
Paul, one of the things that I always try to equate with some of my students is, and I think of this, is, in the golf swing, there's several links in the chain, and I refer to it as obviously a short chain. And if one of the links in that chain is either broken or defective, then that chain is not going to be very sturdy and is not going to be able to support the weight that you need. And much like in the golf swing, if an area, as Mike just pointed out, if there's a dysfunction, if you will, in the lower body or hanging back, this is going to cause, an ineffective downswing and cause some of the problems we just talked about. So obviously the key thing is to identify what the problem is, where it's happening, and then working in some drills that are going to help the student overcome that. What are some suggestions that maybe you've worked some success with your students?
You mean for casting?
Yes.
So I think a lot of times, casting comes from wanting to kind of generate power with the hands from the top of the backswing. And so feeling like you are starting the downswing by shifting your weight and allowing the club to fall with relatively light grip pressure, and getting a sensation for if you were to imagine, say, a house in your backswing, and there's a wall, there's a floor, and then there's this kind of diagonal roof. If you go to the top of your backswing, you shift your weight and you just let the club kind of tumble down the roof instead of pulling it. A lot of times that is a pretty helpful analogy for people. And, I think grip pressure is such a huge thing. It's one of the things that I just see over and over again. And so if you can get somebody to loosen their hands just a little bit and swing the weight of the golf club and feel it falling like that, it tends to help a lot.
Yeah, I agree. Bill, just sort of piggybacking on that real quick, and then we're going to move on to the last one here. A common thing that I see, and I think it goes back to what you touched on the very beginning. Again, people sort of over-exaggerating a certain move, or as you put out, sticking our butt out too far. I think the same can be said about the club coming down in through impact. I think a lot of people have been under this, and I've even seen videos of this where, they'll talk about getting into a position at the top and just sort of pulling down on the handle, if you will. And I think people misunderstood that, and a lot of times you see it getting out of sequence. Is this something that you've experienced as well with some of the students where they think that they've just got to really pull down on that club handle in order to drive through into impact?
Yeah, you definitely do, and it steepens the angle of attack horribly. And as we know, that doesn't do any good for anything. One of the drills that I'll utilize with players to get that sequence a little better is I'll literally give them a 7 or an 8 iron, have them split their hands. I call it basically a hockey drill. So the lead hand or the left hand on the right player's up top, and the other one's down at the bottom of the grip. And the thing is, with the flip or anything else, or with a shift, if you're trying to pull, you're not going to be able to let that toe work over back to square. And that's one of the drills that I like to use to help people get the sequence right, because if things get out of whack, you're going to stick the pick in the ground a foot behind the ball, or you're going to be falling backwards and sculling it, and it just isn't going to feel right. Then they get the idea of the angle of attack and how the closure of the face will work a lot better.
Yeah, and that's a great drill for a lot of things, Bill. I like that drill as well, doing a split grip like that. A lot of times if your timing or sequence is out, that's a great way to sort of groove that back in by doing that. Because a lot of times when you take your traditional grip, if somebody's swing is out of sequence, a lot of times they don't feel it quite the same. But when you split the grip like that, I find that a lot of times, at least it has for me over the years, has really worked successfully. And I don't know about you, but that's something that I'll do if I feel people have gotten out of sequence. I'll actually refer to that drill as a way of sort of helping them to feel the natural transition. And also it gives instant feedback, as you pointed out. If they're not doing things correctly, they're going to see instant feedback and feel it as well with that type of grip. Last one, Bill, take a deep breath. I'm going to start with you on this one. This one, of course, for those tuning into the show, I'm not referring something that you are getting at your local drinking establishment, but the dreaded chicken wing. We've all heard it. Most of us know what it is. Bill, why don't you start the conversation off, and then Mike and Paul, by all means, join in. First off, what is a chicken wing, and how do we overcome that beast?
Yeah, the basically a real simple definition is the upper lead arm separates from the body, and you would lose a connection there. We see this. I mean, this is common, and you even see some very good players that run into this issue. One of the things that I see is a root cause of this, again, getting back to everything we say, is a bad posture and a bad weight shift through the ball. If you're hanging back at times, you add excessive pressure to that lead arm, your left arm tightens or straightens, it'll pull away from the side tremendously. One of the little drills that I've worked with players to do this, to help them get that feeling back a little bit so that arm doesn't come away, especially when they're putting that excessive pressure on in the trail fingers of the lead hand. As Paul said, the grip pressure is horrible at times. I have them just grip the club with their index finger and their thumb and basically take those last 3 off the club it allows that arm to stay on the side, and it opens the shift up a little bit better too. That excessive pressure could actually, I've seen it cause a little reverse pivot as well, because it kind of, you hit a roadblock as you're trying to move through the shot. It locks up and pushes you backwards. And that's just an excessive, over an exaggerated example, but in effect, that's what we see.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Mike, what about you? I'm sure you've seen a few chicken wings yourself out in the golf course with some of your students.
Yeah.
I'm sure you could probably mirror a lot of what Bill just talked about, but anything else you want to add about that?
Yeah, so the grip pressure, definitely, for sure, grabbing out of the club too tightly and not allowing it to rotate the way it's supposed to go. But a lot of times I find chicken wings are the what happens after. We're trying to hold the club face open because the club path is so far to the left, and they're trying not to hit themselves with the golf club. I mean, that's what we see when we're watching on gears, with players or on video. It's an after effect of them trying to play golf because they're swinging so far left, and a lot of times they deal off to the club face, and it's a learned behavior as well. So, getting them to rotate the club face is a big deal, and getting that lead elbow to point more towards the ground instead of towards the sky, it's a big deal. Turn it over.
Yeah, well said. And Paul, finally, I think another thing that I see a lot of times that ultimately can bring out the best of the chicken wing artists is an actual sudden stop in the downswing. I've seen a lot of players that will come back with a pretty decent backswing, but for some reason they just feel out of sync as they're coming down, and they'll actually almost halt their swing a little bit or slow it down, and as they come in through their transition, as Mike just talked about, they sort of hold off. So there's all kinds of things that cause it, but I'm sure, as the other two have mentioned, you've seen it as well. Any final thoughts on the chicken wing and what we can do to just keep it where it belongs, and that is on a nice hot steaming plate in our local beer establishment?
That is a good place for it. I mean, it's hard to follow those two gentlemen. They did a great job, but I think it's, it's a byproduct of all of the things that they discussed. And one of the things that we all need to remember and know as a priority, I think, in the golf swing is that your weight's got to be forward at impact, and the club has to swing into the golf ball on a shallow diagonal plane. And if you're not doing those things, and if your grip is really tight and you're trying to steer the club, then the odds are that the club's going to be coming in steeply and to the left, and then you're going to have to make room for it. Otherwise, it's going to go into the ground, and you may hurt yourself. So that's where that kind of reaction comes from. And so, shifting your weight early in the downswing, keeping your grip pressure nice and soft, feeling that club fall, like I said before, I think all of those things would kind of eventually lead to a better impact dynamic, which will allow you to not have to chicken wing it.
Right. Just on a final note, guys, then I want to give you just each a moment just to let the folks know if they want to reach out to you either after the show or at some point in the future. One of the reasons why I think it's important to even review a lot of these common swing faults with the audience and with many of our amateur golfers out there, and why we encourage people not to just, when they come for lessons, to work on their game there or when they're at the golf course, but to do things while they're at home. There's all kinds of things that you can do, and I'm going to talk a little bit about with my guests here in coming up in a moment or two about some of the things that they can help their students with at home as well. But doing a lot of these things, I think, can make a world of difference in how people not only play the game but get enjoyment out of it. There's nothing worse than if you haven't picked up a club in a while and the excuses come out of the mill room why you're not going to the golf course and working your game, and you get out there and the first tee you're all over the place. So I think some of the things that we talked about are very common. swing faults, and you guys have given some great cures and tips, if you will, to help the listeners out there. So I appreciate it as always. I'm just going to go right down the line, Paul, Mike, and then Bill. Paul, where can the folks, if they want to reach out to you, get a hold of you?
Ted, thank you very much for having me tonight. I'm the Director of Instruction at Forsgate Golf Academy. We have a website, forsgategolfacademy.com. I also have a personal website, which is paulkastergolf.com. I'm, in addition to TPI certified, KVEST, I'm also AimPoint certified, so I'm looking forward to hearing your interview with James and Mr. Sweeney in a few minutes.
Sweeney.
And yes, sir. Yep. And I appreciate you having me on.
Well, as always, Paul, I appreciate your thoughts and input to the Coaches Corner panel. Great discussion tonight, guys. Mike, let the folks know how they can reach out to you and give us a quick update on the Mike Fay Golf Show.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm Mike Fay, the Director of Player Performance here at the BOYNE Golf Academy in Northern Michigan. You can check out BOYNEGolf.com, or my website is MikeFayGolf.com. We did start a podcast, the Mike Fay Golf Show, and starting in September once again. In the wintertime, we're going to be running the Ask the Pro Show on Twitter. So you can follow me on all the social media networks. And thanks so much for having me on. It was fun.
I appreciate it, guys, as always. And last but not least, Bill, how can the folks reach you?
Yeah, you can get me the same way, BillAbramsGolf.com. They can also reach me at 630-926-4554. That's my direct line, and that works in both Florida and Illinois. So, again, Ted, thanks so much for this wonderful platform and opportunity to really help people get some of the organization to their game and being able to understand the information that's out there. I think it's a wonderful thing you're doing, and keep up the great work. Thanks so much.
Well, I appreciate
Amen.
it, guys, and thanks for doing a fantastic job here on the Coaches Corner panel, and I look forward to having you guys back here again real soon with some more interesting tips and training advice for many of our students out there. So thanks, guys. Have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you real soon.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Ted.
Thanks so much,
Thank
Ted.
you. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
You too.
All right, that was the Coaches Corner panel. Paul Kaster, Mike Fay, and Bill Abrams on the show talking about common swing faults for the last hour. And now we're going to move on to two other gentlemen that are going to be joining me here in just a moment, but let me just read a little bit about each of them. James Kyle, as you might remember, was on, I think a couple of months ago. He was on with some other great professionals, and he is the PGA professional and owner of James Kyle Golf Academy. He was also the 2014 West Central Chapter PGA Teacher of the Year and the 2012 West Central Chapter PGA Junior Golf Leader of the Year. Also the 2011 U.S. Kids Golf Top 50 Teacher, honorable mention. And joining him tonight, he's bringing one of his good friends, Mark Sweeney, the founder and developer of AimPoint Golf and the inventor of the AimPoint virtual putting line and the AimPoint green reading method. Let me tell you a little bit about Mark, and then I'll bring both James and Mark on the show. Mark has taught over 100 tour players, including 3 of the world #1 ranked players, as well as thousands of amateurs and teacher professionals in over 40 countries. He was named one of the best teachers in Florida by Golf Digest recently and was nominated for the 50 best teachers in America. He also won an Emmy in 2008 for the George Wenzel Technical Achievement Award for his AimPoint virtual putting line, which was shown on the Golf Channel from 2007 up to 2012. So without further ado, let me bring on James Kyle and Mark Sweeney.
Thank you, Ted.
Guys, welcome. Not a problem. Welcome to the show.
Thanks.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Guys, let's jump. Well, I appreciate it, and I apologize for the delay. We got a little bit tied up in wrapping up the Coaches Corner panel, but glad you guys patiently waited. James, I'm going to start with you first, if you don't mind, and then Mark, I want to get into obviously some specifics about AimPoint to let you share with some of the listeners a little bit about what the AimPoint method is and so forth. But James, I just want to start off real quick with just a couple of questions for you, if that's all right.
Sure.
All right. I want you just to define what areas, as a teacher, professional, and coach, what areas do you find most difficult to teach and why?
As far as the entire game?
Yes.
I would say the most difficult areas are beginners who are just starting out and players that, haven't been on the golf course yet. They need a lot of training. They need, obviously to learn how to hit the ball, get it in the air. They learn how to hit short game shots. They typically at the very beginning struggle a lot with putting, understanding how to control speed, and then of course learning how to read the green and understanding the right line. And once they have all that, of course, typically they need a lot of repetition to believe what they're doing. So I would say, that's what is the most difficult part for me as a teacher.
And would you say that those are obviously the key areas that you focus on in your academy? Is obviously it's difficult because of some of the individuals that you're dealing with that maybe aren't grasping everything that you're trying to explain to them, but is that also some of the key areas that you try to work with your students on?
Absolutely. Whenever I see somebody new, I try to develop a program where we may be together, say, for like 12 weeks. And during those 12 weeks, we cover everything that they would need to go out and play golf and not be intimidated to be with their friends or with their business associates or to play in small tournaments, charity outings, just so that they're, comfortable to go out there and not be afraid, really.
Yeah, well said. Mark, welcome to the show, and I know this is the first time on Golf Talk Live for you, and I know that you've had the opportunity to be interviewed many, many times. So let me just start off with obviously the most obvious and simple question, just for those out there that might be listening that aren't familiar with AimPoint. Just give us a little bit of background. How did you develop the AimPoint method or system, and what was sort of the methodology, if you will, behind why you came up with that product?
Yeah, sure. The really short version is that in 2003, I basically wrote a software program that predicted how to putt on any golf green, on real golf greens. So this goes way back, 15 years or so, and it was a very sophisticated computer program. And over the course of the next 10 or more years, it basically boiled down to a very, very simple method that any golfer could use. So in the beginning, it was really designed for a computer program and for TV. But I learned so much about green reading, about how greens behave in general, that I thought there's got to be a way that we can apply this knowledge to a regular golfer. And the original versions were a little bit complicated. They're very accurate, but a little bit complicated to use. And then eventually we kind of distilled it down to a very, very simple method that I was forced to distill it down because I had to teach a group of 8, 9-year-old kids. And they said, you can't teach angles. And you can't do anything. They haven't had angles in school yet, so they don't know what a 30-degree angle is. It was just kind of a bolt of lightning that we came up with the express method that we use now. And that you actually get the same answer within an inch or two of what the computer would tell you.
Right, and what a great test, to have to get you to rethink that is to put you in front of 8 and 9-year-olds, because you're right. You've got to keep it as simple as possible, and it shouldn't be difficult really. Anything that you do out in the golf course should be, simple and easy to understand, because the more complicated, and I think this is one of the, in my opinion, I think this is one of the negatives in the golf industry is I think here in the last, and James, feel free to jump in, agree or disagree, but I think this is one of the problems in the golf industry is that we've, with all this technology that's come about, it's become very, very difficult. James, you may have had students, and Mark, you may have had individuals that you've worked with that said, you know what, I just don't understand all this technology that's coming out. I don't know how to use it. I don't understand it. Is this something that that you're seeing, James, in your academy? Is just the overwhelming issues that come about with technology?
I would say that our younger generation, they are really excited about some of the technology that I bring out to the lesson tee or to the putting green. Mm-hmm. Some of the older players who have been playing golf, whether they're beginners or they've been playing for a very long time already, I might test them just to see if they would like to use some of the technology I have. But I would say they are they're not resistant to it, but it's sort of like some of the folks that we have, even like my grandmother, it took forever for us to get her a cell phone. And because she was just so afraid to have a cell phone. And so, but the younger kids now, whenever I bring out some technology, they're so used to having technology at home that the excitement level is off the charts, and they are, beyond ready to learn. They can't wait to listen to the information and improve. And, the reality is the improvements are, I wouldn't say instant, but in some cases it is. And they can't wait for their next lesson to use it again. That's really the truth.
Yeah, and I'm a firm believer in technology. I think it's great, but I think one of the mistakes that I've seen over time, over these last decade or so, is that sometimes the coaches forget that the technology is really designed to help us gather information that can be better used to serve our students. And I think sometimes in the excitement of relaying that information to the students can overwhelm them. Too much data, too much information. And Mark, you made that point right from the get-go, is that you recognize that the information, as valuable and as accurate as it is, was not going to work well in the marketplace to be able to move your product out there. So talk about the process of, as it is today, AimPoint Express, if you will. What is the process? I know we don't have the availability of visual here, but in as best you can, explain the process of how AimPoint works.
It's actually pretty much a two-step process. You're trying to feel with your feet how much side slope there is, and depending on the putt and how long it is, there's a correct kind of place in the putt to feel it. But you're really feeling how much side tilt there is, because that is determining probably 95% of how much break you're getting. The rest would be kind of uphill, downhill, grain, things like that. But the ball really breaks because it's tilted sideways. So all we're doing is putting a value on that, usually between 1 and 3. And it just so happens that if you hold up 1, 2, or 3 fingers to match your 1, 2, or 3 side slope, you get a mathematically correct break. And that was kind of a big shocking thing that we discovered on this, is that, why is it that when you hold up 1 finger on a 1% slope, you actually get the right break? It's just kind of lucky that it works out that way, but it actually matches my computer program, which is about 150,000 lines long. When you hold up your fingers, it matches it within about 2 inches from 20 feet. So it's almost an exact match. Wow. So you're really, what you're seeing people do is they're feeling slope, because when you get down to less than 2% slope, you can absolutely feel it, but that's where your eyes start to really break down. But everybody can feel 1% or less slope. Everybody I've ever taught in my life can feel it, regardless of how much experience they have, or regardless of their age. It doesn't matter. Our brains are wired really, really well to feel tilt, because that's what keeps us from falling down when we walk around all day long. So we take advantage of that process to simply apply that to green reading and say, if I have a 1% side tilt on this putt and I hold up 1 finger, I'm going to get the right break.
Now,
exactly.
Just explain. Explain to the folks the second step, if you will, with your hand and holding the fingers up. Where are you? You're obviously behind the ball. Is that correct? And then you're holding it up. Where is your eye line looking at?
Well, basically, think of it this way. When you hold up your fingers in front of your eyes, you're essentially creating a launch angle. So if you think about a launch angle with your driver, or whatever angle that might be, every putt has a launch angle sideways rather than up in the air. You got to launch it out to the side of the hole, because gravity is going to turn the ball left or right depending on tilt. So when you're actually holding your fingers up, all you're doing is creating that launch angle, and the space you're covering with your fingers is how much the ball is going to move. So if you hold up your finger against the hole, we're holding up against where the flagstick would be. That space you're covering with your hand is how much gravity is going to affect the ball. And the cool thing about it is it automatically scales out for the length of the putt. So obviously longer putts break more than shorter putts. But because you're creating an angle with your hand, as you go farther and farther away, it still continues to match the effective gravity. So there's little fine-tuning things you can do on it, but essentially that's all you're doing is holding your hands up against where the flagstick would be.
Right. And obviously the next component is obviously the speed of the putt itself. How do you decipher, how do you measure that through your system to help guarantee success? Obviously the system works well, and you've been working with some top-ranked players in the world. They obviously understand the method that you're expressing here. So how does speed come into the equation?
Well, speed's a little more difficult, because your speed's going to change based on uphill, downhill, length, green speed, all sorts of things like that. we can give pretty good guidelines. For instance, a fast downhill putt, what the effective length of it is. So you have a 20-foot downhill putt. It might only play 6 feet or 7 feet, and there's ways we can kind of help you with that. But speed's a little more developmental because every time the green speed changes, the effective ball speed is changing. And so there's a series of training we do to get the player to understand speed better, how to control speed. Some of it's tempo, some of it's stroke length. But it's not quite as clear cut as the break. I mean, the break is A plus B equals C. It's very, very straightforward. Speed is so dynamic that you really have to train the player to be able to react to different situations, and it takes longer to develop.
Yeah, and obviously, James, as I'm sure you would attest to, speed is something that really your students have to work on independently of using this system. I mean, this is something that regardless of whether they were adopting the AimPoint method, would have to work on their speed on the green. So talk a little bit about that, what you try to do, and I know that you're involved as a certified instructor with AimPoint. First off, how you came about getting involved and why you got involved, and how you try to incorporate that in your teaching.
Well, how I got involved with AimPoint
Yes.
was just over 3 years now, which is mind-blowing, really. But I was watching, I know, right, Mark? I was watching Adam Scott on TV, like at the Masters, and, I was like, what is he doing? And how could I not know what he's doing if I have clients asking me? So at the time, I found his website, and I reached out to another instructor that's in Florida and sent him an email, and he told me that I should reach out to Mark. And I did so, and, Mark, it was really wonderful whenever I asked him about being a part of it. He wanted to know about me, and I gave him basically a full resume, and he liked what he saw. And so he accepted me, and I went over, and the first day I went over with him, I mean, we were together, I think, 8 to 10 hours of time. I specifically worked with him at his home club. We spent the whole day together, and, for me, I tried to play professional golf in the late 90s and tried to get on tour. And, I'm sitting there like, wow, how could I have not known this? No wonder I did not make the tour. And that's really how I came out of it, is like, wow, I just can't believe this, what I've just learned. And so, nowadays, whenever I'm working with my players, I have a lot of competitive juniors that I train. And when it comes to putting, every one of them that are competing in tournaments, I have trained them to use AimPoint Express. And I think since in the last 3 years, up till 2016, I think I'm averaging 13 tournament wins a year with my juniors who are using AimPoint Express. So, and even last year, it might have been close to 20 tournaments. One of my juniors who is 12 years old and made the high school golf team here in Tampa. He's probably going to play number 1 or number 2, but he just came back from the U.S. Kids Worlds. And, the long and the short of it is that the players, without a doubt, their putting stroke averages are down, at 30 or just below using AimPoint Express. And without it, one of my college girls who's on a full ride at a college up north prior to learning AimPoint Express, her scoring average was just above 75, and after AimPoint Express, she was just above 72, and is on a full ride now and has won a college tournament already. And, the reality is that it's unbelievable. The ones that I work with now, they practice putting just about every day, now that we have school, but they're constantly practicing their feels and, their start lines and doing the right things. And when it comes to speed, they've all been taught how to judge the uphills and the downhills and what to do. And, they're successful.
Yeah, and I think once you have, it's like anything. I think once you have the proper tools, to do anything in life, really, golf or otherwise, your success rate is going to increase. Mark, what do you think, in your opinion, up until now, and forgetting what you know through your method, what do you think was really some of the most misunderstood about putting for the average amateur out there? What are areas that gave them the most difficulty, and why do you think that was? And obviously, you can explain how your system has been able to help, as James just did, see some incredible results.
Well, I would say the biggest thing I still see to date is people are always blaming their stroke for missed putts. You watch on TV and they miss a putt and they say, oh, they pulled it, they pushed it, they did whatever. And in my experience, most people, and I mean most people, including a lot of tour players, don't read the greens that accurately. And if you don't read if you don't know the target, it's really, really hard to have a good putting stroke. So the stroke actually disintegrates if you're a bad green reader, because if you have a perfect stroke and perfect aim and you don't read the green right, you're going to miss every single putt. And as athletes, we're not going to allow that to happen. So, green reading has to come first, in my opinion. You have to know what the target is. And if you know what the target is, then you know what your alignment is, and then you know whether you can return the face to neutral. But without a good read, just everything unravels. And what I still see the most of who don't understand AimPoint is they're constantly blaming their stroke, and they're saying, well, maybe I'll learn AimPoint after my stroke is good. And what they don't realize is your stroke cannot be good. Your stroke cannot be good if you're not a good greener. It's not possible for it to be good.
Agreed.
And so I hear that all the time, and it just drives me crazy because they're putting it backwards. The first layer of good putting is green reading, and then everything else can layer on top of that very simply, not the other way around.
Yeah, and I equate it with, driving a vehicle. I mean, you're not going to get into a car until you know how to drive first. And, you're right. They're sort of putting the proverbial cart before the horse. James, let me ask you with respect to this. Now, obviously, you've become involved with AimPoint and using it with your students and that. What would you say to a fellow professional out there that maybe has not jumped on board yet? What are some of the benefits that you've seen using it other than what you've just mentioned? And what would you say to your fellow professionals that maybe have not, jumped in the same boat, if you will, as you have?
I would say that with the experience I've had to date with some professional players, amateurs, amateurs +5 handicap all the way to, say, 40 handicap, that learning AimPoint Express, whether you're a tour player or a 30 handicapper, you're going to learn the same thing. And the mind-blowing experience is truly that what you thought you were seeing, you're technically guessing every time you're using your eyes. And even now, whenever I'm working with players, and I have lots of, especially the men, oh, I'm a good putter, and I'm like, okay, well, let's putt this putt here, and whenever they go and they putt it and they miss it by 10 inches, but in their eyes, well, I almost made it, and I'm like, wait a minute, no, you missed it by 10 inches. That's almost a foot. Yeah. So here's the reason why: is that the reality is that, yes, you had a good idea that the ball was going to move to the left, but the reality is that every time you're using your eyes, you are guessing. So the amount of movement, it is, you could get lucky, but the amount of movement, unless you have something like what we provide, AimPoint Express, you don't actually have the answer. But they sometimes will fight you, and oh, I know what I'm doing, but the reality is they don't. So, to say to, my fellow pros, the reality is that even professionals, I had a young lady that was playing one of the mini tours a couple of years ago, and whenever she couldn't believe, wait, I have to aim there? And I said, well,
yep.
I said, if you want the ball to come to rest near the hole, and, like many professional players, I think even Mark could share a stat on, there's an old saying about pros miss high and amateurs miss low, and it's actually not true. Typically, most players, they don't ever play enough break, and therefore the ball speed is always much too fast. So they 3-putt because the ball is traveling too fast to begin with, and it was never on the right line. So, you know, the bottom line is that it works. And, you know, I gave a guy a lesson last week who's probably about a 15 handicap, and I always ask players, well, how much break do you think you see here? And they'll say, oh, well, it's 1 cup. And then they miss it, 12 inches below the hole. And so,
right.
12 inches below the hole means it's like 3 more cups. Well, that's a lot of what you thought you saw is not even close. And this is why, if I can help you to realize that, and then they feel more confident over the putt, the handicap is coming down because they're not going to have as many putts as usual, for sure.
Yeah, well said. Mark, since James brought it up, let's talk a little bit about the stats. You've obviously worked with a lot of tour players and that. What's been some of the feedback that you've gotten with them as far as their putting averages and so forth? Can you give us any sort of numbers on what the difference was before AimPoint and now that they're using AimPoint? Can you give us maybe a general idea with you don't have to name names, but just as an overall?
Yeah, I mean, generally, when people are using it, they almost across the board get dramatically better. I mean, the first player to ever use AimPoint was Scott McCarron, and this goes back to probably 07, 08, and he was right, always kind of in the bottom 20% or so, and he went to the top 10 in putting within 9 months, I think, and I think it was top 10 every year he was playing after that, and he used it religiously. Ian Poulter was using it. He went from like 128 or something to 4th. And then Adam Scott has improved. I mean, Lydia Ko was first in all putting categories last year. And I think first and second the year before that. And she's used it for the last 3.5 years or so. I think her first year on tour was when she started using it. So when the people who use it religiously, meaning they read every putt with it, and it's just the way they do it, they improve the most by far. I mean, you'll see some players out there that kind of dabble with it. Well, they'll use it only on short putts or only on long putts or only when they're unsure, and they get better, but they never get the full effect of AimPoint, which is this is just how you get your number. It's like getting a yardage. Every time you have a shot, you get a yardage and you play your yardage. Well, AimPoint's the same way, and the more you do it, the better you get at it because you're constantly associating the feeling that you're getting for slope with how much the ball breaks in with speed. And so it's really important that when people do it, they keep doing it because that's what keeps them sharp, and that's what kind of glues everything together. As far as juniors and amateurs, some of the results are just ridiculous. I mean, I get posts all the time on our private group about players who are 39 putts around and they're down to 30 or 31.
Wow.
Juniors, pretty much everybody who we track gets down to about the 30 range. I personally believe pretty much anybody can get down to about 30 putts. And anybody obviously having more than 35 or 36 is just, now we're starting to talk about 3 putts and it's just some really, really off green reading and putting. But I've seen across the board, I've seen huge increases.
Yeah, and what's interesting, guys, is this. When you go back to the amateurs for a second, and you consider how much of golf is played on the putting surface, why it just baffles the mind why so many amateurs are over at the practice tee working on their drives or their long irons or their hybrids or what have you, and spend very very little time at an area. James, I mean, what do you do short of bonking them on the head and saying, smarten up? What do we need to do to get people to realize that this is where they should be practicing their golf?
Honestly, Ted, I'm not sure that's even possible. All year long, whenever, right? It's like, you lead the horse to water, but you can't make them drink.
Right.
It's amazing. Every year, whenever I get new clients who come to me and they're like, okay, let's fix my whole game. And, I want to buy new clubs. I want to do all this stuff. And when it comes down to the putting, it's like week 15 before we're finally working on putting. And I bring up this one guy again. I've been training now since about January. And he actually drives about 45 minutes to see me from South Tampa. And we're having a great time together. And literally since January, we've been working on his full swing down to his wedge game. And a couple of weeks ago, he finally came over. He goes, all right, we're going to do level 1 and level 2 AimPoint, short putts and long putts. And I was like, oh, thank goodness, because I already know that, the results, if he's shooting 85 to 90, I already know that we're going to drop 5 strokes in my mind. And not to say that's a guarantee, but I just know, with the players I've trained, what happens right after. And I even thought about sharing his quote, but he responded, he goes, I can't believe we waited until July to do the putting. And then he actually gave me a testimony, and he goes, I'm actually more happy with all that I've learned from the putting than I was with the full swing. So I was like, oh, thanks. He's actually, his putting game is superior to the rest of his game, and the rest of his game is a little bit better, but nothing like what he improved in putting. So it's kind of funny.
Mark, and James, you're exactly right. I mean, this is you could write a book on what you just talked about, because it's so true with so many. It doesn't matter whether they're corporate clients or whether you're 25, 30 handicap amateurs out there. They're all the same. They work at it backwards. Mark, in a perfect world, if a student was coming to you, are you going to start them on the putting green first and work the other way, or what do you think needs to happen in the industry?
Well, that's an easy question for me because I only teach putting. I don't teach anything else. The reality is, number one, I think a lot of amateurs don't practice putting because they don't get any better from practicing putting, because they don't really know what they're doing. I mean, I practiced when I first moved to Florida. I was playing tons of golf, and my putting never got any better. So I felt like it was kind of useless. Whereas, you certainly don't want to be losing balls and hitting balls OB, so you kind of spend more time on that. I mean, the putting's never terrible, but I never really got better either. And I think that's the way a lot of amateurs think. I know a lot of my friends think the same way. They're like, well, what's the point of, I'm going to putt the same no matter what it seems like, so why would I go kill myself hitting balls? It's not really practicing, it's just kind of hitting balls on the putting green. Whatever I do with putting kind of depends on the player. I mean, if they're very, very high handicap, I would tend to do speed first. Because the read is so easy, it's really hard to misread by more than a foot, but it's obviously very, very easy to miss the speed by more than a foot, so I'd go speed first. If it's a tour player, then we kind of make sure the read is good, and then you have to kind of quickly get into aim and line and speed and kind of meld it all together. I don't know. I think it'd be very hard to just start with putting with somebody who came for golf lessons, though, because I think that's not what they're expecting.
Right.
No, and James, he's right. I mean, it's in a lot of golfers' mind. It's not, and let's be honest, it's not exciting for a lot of golfers. They want to, grip it and rip it. Thanks to John Daly and others out there and Bubba Watts and some of these other big long drive hitters. It's not. I'll even throw the term out. It's not sexy in some people's eyes. But the truth of the matter is, if you look at the top players in the world. If you look at their putting stats compared to the guy that's 150-something down the line, that's usually where you're going to see the biggest difference, correct?
That's correct.
So, I think that, right? Mark, would that be an accurate statement, do you think? That
well, yeah. I mean, there's always guys who jump up and win who are not statistically good putters. But they're usually, they'll win once a year, they'll win here and there, they'll kind of keep their card. But if you look at the guys who are really consistently good week in and week out, I mean, you need to be a good putter because the long game kind of comes and goes and it cycles. I did a study a number of years ago what basically said how often does somebody get a top 10, and the best players throughout, not including Tiger because he was every single week, but the next best players behind him, it was like Furyk and Mickelson at the time. It was about every 4 to 5 tournaments, but your average player got a top 10 like every 23 tournaments. So the long game, cycles up and down. But when you're hitting a good cycle with your long game, your putting better be there. So you really need your putting to be there good every single week, so that when your long game catches up and you're hitting it well, that's when you really take advantage and make your money.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, you don't very often, I mean, again, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but very seldomly do you see a player whose long game is on, but their putting stinks, comes out and wins the tournament at the end of the week. I mean, it can happen,
very rare.
you know, depending on.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I mean, depending how the rest of the field. I mean, the rest of the field has to be playing pretty bad golf themselves, and you know, but and Augusta's a good example. I mean, there's lots of guys that may not necessarily be in the middle of the fairway every time, but their game around the green is so good that they're able to compensate for bad or missed shots throughout the round. And ultimately, you know, we've seen that over the years as well. I mean, even in the last few years, we've seen some players that have stumbled a little bit around Augusta, but their putting held them strong, and you know, ultimately went on to win or certainly finished top, right?
Yeah, I mean, just putting well inside 10 feet can make up for massive errors with long game. You know, because kind of 4 to 10 feet is really your par save area. So if you're missing greens and pitching on and trying to say par, you know, there's a lot of 4, 5, 6, 7 footers in there. And if you're not putting well, you're dropping all those shots. You know, and if you are putting well, then it's amazing what it can do for your score.
So let's talk about, yeah, you're exactly right. Let's talk about the process of becoming AimPoint certified, if you will. What's the process? What's involved for those that maybe aren't at this point? What do they need to do, and how does it work? Mark, I'm going to go with you, and then James, go ahead and.
Yeah, the certification process is basically you'd have to get in touch with me because I don't have an open certification, meaning I don't just certify everybody and anybody who asks. We really kind of do a screening process and try to get the right instructors, because my philosophy is I'd rather have high quality versus loads of quantity. So basically, there's a little bit of a screening process and application. If you're accepted, then I do a full day training in Orlando that gets you level 1 certification, which basically means you understand all the fundamentals, all the way up, you know, single breaks, double breaks, long putts, short putts, and how to teach it, because there's definitely a skill to teaching it simply and effectively. And the thing about AimPoint is it's actually so relatively easy that a lot of people want to take it and overcomplicate it. And as soon as you overcomplicate it, you kind of dilute its effectiveness. So you've really got to kind of turn off your analytical brain and say, here's all you do. You do step A, you do step B, and you're finished. There's nothing more to it. So there's quite a bit of work done on that, just how to teach it well. And then so it's basically a full day of training once you're accepted.
Right. And then what about level 2? What's the next step?
So level 2 is after you've been certified for a certain amount of time and taught a certain number of students. I come and do an audit. So I'm actually doing one tomorrow where I'll go watch the instructor teach. They've got to teach the whole class, and I'm taking notes and auditing and giving feedback and making sure that they really know all the concepts inside and out. And then I'll do some additional training with them, you know, kind of the more advanced concepts, more advanced calibration, and the things we do kind of at the tour level, how to put the pieces together for a more advanced player. And then that gets them to level 2.
James, in your view of things, do you see the process in obviously teaching the AimPoint method, the simpler the better in working with your students and so forth? Is that, you know, as Mark had just sort of pointed out, is making sure they're teaching the methods and so forth in the proper sequence and you know, sort of overcomplicating the process? Is this something that you try to be conscious of both for yourself and also when you're working with your students?
Absolutely. You know, it's important whenever you're working with them that you know, follow the teachings, you know, step by step. And because, you know, if you don't, you'll end up where the students might be confused on what they're learning. So the reality is that, like Mark said, you know, the process is, you know, is simple. And if you stick to the plan and do it right, your players are literally putting it into play as soon as they're done with the class. I mean, they could literally go right out to play golf and use it right then, confidently, and get results. It's as long as you stick to it, it's perfect.
And how much, James, this is again for you, James, how much time on average with a student for the first time, how much time are you dedicating, you know, going through the AimPoint method, And is this something that you work on each time you're with that student, or is it sort of a one-shot deal where, you talk to them about it, let's say tomorrow, and then they run away with the concept and sort of work on it on their own, or do you sort of do like a refresher as you go along throughout their sessions?
Yeah, there are some, for me, once the player's taken the class, like level 1, level 2 is 2 hours long. And whenever they're done with those 2 hours, which is short putts and long putts and double breaks, they're ready to play. And, I do have many clients who come back for refreshers. And of course, lots of my players that I see often, because of the way their programming is set up with me. So I follow up with them a lot, especially my competitive juniors. So they're continually, working on their AimPoint, sometimes every week. But yeah, I mean, after the 2-hour class, no matter what the level of golfer is, they're ready to use it, ready to go out and play a tournament and be confident with it for sure.
Mark, let me ask you sort of a separate question here. This is something actually a student asked a while ago, but I thought since you were going to be on the program, I'd ask you this. Obviously posture is important in the golf swing, but what about in the putting stroke? We see a lot of different approaches to putting. Obviously, some of the younger players and young guns on the tour today have very similar looking putting strokes, but if you go back 20, 30 years ago in the days of Nicklaus and Palmer and that, you had all kinds of different postures. Is that as important as what you're teaching for a golfer to have a certain posture, or as long as they have the basic fundamentals of the putting stroke down, they can pretty much have their body in any shape or form that they want? What are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts are, once your read is good, I'm not a believer that there's a single posture, not even by nowhere near a believer in that. So what you learn very quickly is we do AimPoint first, and they learn the read, and then the next question is, okay, can you point your putter where you want to point your putter? About 97% of people can't do that, and posture has a huge effect just on aim, just to begin with, before we even get in the stroke. A lot of times you'll see players who set up like Jack Nicklaus because that's how they see a straight line. That's how they can aim their putter where they need to. Then you get people who are set a very kind of standard head position, and that's how they see a straight line. Some have their heads down, some have their heads up. They do that for a reason, and you have to kind of figure out how a player points the putter the best he can, and then the next piece is, can you make your motion, make your stroke, and return it to the same place. Posture will kick in on that also, but it's absolutely 100% individual. And what works perfectly for one player of mine would destroy another player, absolutely destroy their ability to putt well. So you've got to be very careful of that. So anytime I ever hear somebody saying, well, I hear that you're always supposed to have your eyes here, your head here, your whatever. You got to be really, that's just there's a 90% chance you're going to be wrong on that. Maybe 10% of the people it's going to work for, and 90% is going to destroy them. So no, there's not one single posture, 100%, no chance.
Yeah. James, let me get you to sort of jump on that as well. Let me just rephrase it a little bit differently. How do you decide, and again, obviously everybody's different, but how do you decide, as Mark just pointed out, somebody like Nicklaus that adopted a certain posture because he needed to view the line a certain way, and then a different player does something different. How do you work with a player and decide what is actually going to work best for them? What's the process in your opinion?
Well, exactly what Mark just said. So especially with my junior golfers, once they know how to read, and then we're trying to see whether or not they know where the putter is aiming. Depending on where that is, on occasion, I might move them, further away from the ball, maybe further over the ball. Right. Sometimes I actually had a person recently, their prescription lenses that they were wearing on their eyeglasses, I had to actually tilt their head down a little bit more. And once I did that, the line that they believed that they were putting, with a putter face on, was actually correct. And, so it's little tiny details like that with each individual player. The beginners, lots of players, you're not sure. They kind of just stand to the ball. Most of them, especially early players, they're standing what you might call way too upright and erect.
Yeah.
So, you're just you kind of let them putt first. You find out whether or not a key, like Mark said, where they think they're aiming the putter, because, oh my gosh, it's amazing too, the fact that they, the players, they don't have a good putter to begin with. And then whenever they're laying the putter face down and they think it's aiming in the middle of the hole and it's aiming 12 inches left. So they have no chance, So once we're working with somebody, that's what we have to do. We have to assess that and move them around until finally they're, what they believe they're seeing is actually what they're seeing. And sometimes that takes more than just one lesson. I'm sure Mark would agree. Some of my players, it takes a few weeks to figure that out.
Yeah,
Right.
It takes constant maintenance too. What I try to do with any competitive golfer is get them aimed less than 1 degree off. It's very hard to get them dead perfectly straight. But if you can get them less than 1 degree, that's inside what I would call your tolerance that we want for a competitive golfer. But every time they change anything, I'll have a player who's just absolutely nailed their aim and nailed their stroke and everything's good, and they go away for 3 weeks on tour and they come back and they're 2 degrees off. And well, what happened? Well, I changed my putter, I changed my grip, I changed my setup position, my ball position, my head position. Any of those things can change your aim, and so it's literally takes constant maintenance. I would say twice a week as a competitive golfer, you've got to be checking your aim. And making sure you're pointing it where you want, because, if you're aimed 1 degree off, you're missing by about 9 feet. You're missing.
Right.
It sounds like that's awfully tight, but with anybody who's trying to make money on tour, you better be less than 1 degree off, or you're gonna be missing 8, 9, 10 foot putts, and it's gonna make you really, really frustrated when you hit your shot to 10 feet and you miss every single one of them.
Yeah, and as I said a little while ago, I think a lot of people misunderstand the importance of putting, and obviously AimPoint has developed a method that not only works but is obviously easy for golfers to adapt to, and it just boggles the mind why somebody would not want to adapt a system that's going to help them score better. And obviously, as I said in the opening, intro, you're obviously working with, literally thousands of amateurs and teacher professionals in over 40 countries. What's been some of the feedback on that area as far as, is there a next level that you're working on, or what's next for AimPoint?
The biggest thing now is, the read is so good right now. There's really, for the first time in probably 15 years, I'd say there's really no room for improvement on the read. There's no putt that I feel like we don't get a really good read on, but it took until probably a couple of years ago, starting in 2003, before I felt that way. So now it's kind of putting everything together, which is, okay, we know you're reading it well, but that's not enough to be a great putter. So I had some students who were absolutely great green readers, and they were still missing. And they were missing because their aim was off, their motion was off. Their motion meaning, they'd aim it well, but they'd shut the face, or open the face,
right,
or block it, or whatever. And then speed. The final kind of frontier for that is speed control, and that takes constant development. And I've spent a lot of time on that in the last year or so. And then mostly now what I'm doing with competitive golfers is, okay, how do you train all those skills? Because it's, golf is so multidimensional. Just in putting, you've got to be able to, read the green, aim your putter, move your putter, control speed, blah, blah, blah. And you've got to train all that. So we're really are developing programs that allow you to train all those skills and monitor that so that you can put all the pieces together. So it's really about assembling all the pieces versus just saying, you're a good green reader now, good luck, because that's not enough. Some players, if you're lucky and everything else is good, they can take that and go off running and they do great. But most people need to still put a few more pieces together. And that's what I spend probably 90% of my time doing.
What area, Mark, let me just, this final question for you. What area, Mark, do you find when you're dealing, because obviously you're dealing with a lot of tour players, and I'm assuming that you're dealing with players on a variety of different tours, not just the younger tours, but maybe even the Champions or the Legends Tour, perhaps.
Sure. Yeah.
Is there a certain area of your method or and putting in general that sort of gaps the ages? Now, I'll give you an example. Do you find that the younger tour players tend to be better with their aim but it's more of a speed issue for them? And do you find some of the more seasoned or I hate to use the word older, but veterans of the game have more difficulty with the aim portion? Where is there a difference, or are they both pretty much the same on either side?
No, I would definitely say there's a difference. I would say with the more seasoned players, they tend to have better speed, but their motion and their mechanics tend to be very hardwired. Whereas with a younger player, if they're doing something that's causing the face to close, you can usually fix that pretty quickly. Whereas with a more experienced players, they just move the way they move, and it's very, very hard to rewire that. So it takes a little more digging to kind of figure out how to put the pieces together. So you have somebody's got great read now, they aim it great, and they're always shutting the face 1 degree. So what's the answer? The answer is let them aim 1 degree right and let them shut the face, or come up with a way where they neutralize that 1 degree closed face because they really, really want to move the putter a certain way, and it's very hard to undo that. And to me, that's the biggest challenge, is you take somebody who's been playing golf for 30 years, putting a certain motion for 30 years, and you're trying to squeeze that last 1 degree of accuracy out, but they're not really willing. A lot of times they'll just tell you, I'm not going to change my ball position. I'm not going to change this. I'm just not going to do it. And they'll tell you. I mean, I've had a player say, I've aimed left my whole life. I don't care. I'm not going to fix it. Okay, well,
right. And
we've got to figure out another way to work around that, then, I guess.
Thank you very much for playing. And unfortunately, we don't have a prize for you today.
Yeah.
James,
I mean, you just kind of hit a wall sometimes with that.
and that's going to happen. Yeah. And James, I know on the full swing, of course, we see this all the time. Somebody's been, especially some of our more seasoned golfers that have been playing for, 30 years or better. I know, especially down here in Florida, we see this all the time. The snowbirds come down here and, they want to connect for a lesson or two and just a tune-up. And, I mean, there's just no way you're going to change them. So, you obviously have to work sometimes with what you can and do the best that you can. But, Mark's exactly right. I mean, they're just not going to change, and there's nothing you can do about it. But you just do the best you can. James, any final thoughts or comments that you want to make on tonight's discussion? And I know we didn't talk as much about what you do specifically at the Academy. I'll have you back on to do that, of course. But I wanted to give both of you an opportunity to talk about AimPoint, because I know that you're both. Mark, obviously being the CEO and founder, but James, I know because you become involved in it and believe in the method soundly, I wanted to give you an opportunity to really focus on that tonight. But any final thoughts or comments that you want to make before we close off?
I would say that, I would hope going forward, every day that I go in, that players will eventually consider learning to not only read the green the right way with AimPoint, but just all the things that goes with it. Like Mark said, lots of players are always focused on the full swing, which is great. Obviously you need to leave the tee box and get the ball down the fairway and get to the green. But when it comes to, getting around the green, so many players, they spend the least amount of time on the part of the game that you actually use the most strokes on. So, having that opportunity, usually it takes me, like I said a little bit ago, it takes me a little while to finally get somebody to let me show them a little something on the green, whether I give them a little test about reading something. And then they realize, wait, what a minute, I didn't realize it was going to move that much. And so, that's, obviously every day you look forward to trying to make a difference. I can tell you this, and I've probably told this to Mark before, but, since I've been a part of the AimPoint family, it's really been life-altering, during the year because of what I've learned being a part of AimPoint. It literally is probably 25 to 30% of my entire teaching business. So, wow. And being able to provide my clients with that type of experience, and, you've got lots of happy people, happy parents, junior golfers are winning tournaments. So, it's really hard to put a price on that. And, I look forward to continuing doing it, really.
Yeah, and it sounds like obviously you've got a winning formula there, and that's the way to go. Mark, just a final question for you, and then excuse me, we'll wrap up here. But of your students that you work with AimPoint and that, would you say that the ladies fare better than the men, or is it about evenly proportionate as far as learning the method? Do you think that the ladies work better at it, adapt it much easier than the guys?
I think they're more open to learning it. The lady golfers, especially LPGA, kind of at any level, they tend to be more open-minded to learning something that they haven't done before, whereas the guys tend to be a little more hardwired to, they're making $1 million on tour, and so they become more risk-averse about learning new things. So I'd say they're more the women are more open to coming and learning as a pro golfer, an experienced golfer, than the men are. But once the guys get it, then they kind of latch their teeth in also. So it takes them a little bit longer to kind of actually take the first step and learn it and dabble with it. But then they see the results. And the reality is I can honestly say I don't think I've ever seen anybody get worse from AimPoint. There's people who have gotten dramatically better. But the worst that's going to happen is you're going to stay the same if you decide not to use it, but it can't actually hurt you. Whereas, you go to the wrong swing instructor, it can hurt you. It's not possible for that to happen with AimPoint, because you're not changing anything. You're just giving them information about how the ball breaks. So yeah, we're getting there. I mean, there's always new guys coming online on tour who start dabbling with it and seeing some success, and they'll go a little deeper and a little deeper on it. I think in a couple of years' time, you'll be probably shocked by how many guys are using it.
Well, certainly if they're smart, they will, and I agree with that. Mark, very quickly, for those that want to learn more about AimPoint and the system and that, where can they go to get more information? And then, James, where can the folks go to reach out to you?
Just go to the website, aimpointgolf.com. There's instructors all over the world on there. If you're going to learn it from a certified instructor, because you're going to learn it the right way. Don't just ask somebody, because I've heard all kinds of crazy stuff out there that are not true that people have learned from friends. So just learn it the right way the first time, and it'll save you lots of aggravation. But website, you can find pretty much everything you need on there.
Perfect. And James, if the folks want to reach out to you as well, how can they go about doing that?
I am, my home base is at a club called Eastlake Woodlands in Oldsmar, Florida. And my website is jameskailgolfacademy.com. And that's where you can find me. Thanks, Ted, so much for having us on.
Not a problem. And James, I'm going to get back to you. I know you emailed me before the show in response to the Coach's Corner. I know you want to participate in that. And I'll get back to you following the show about the dates and so forth. But James and Mark, I want to thank you for joining me tonight on Golf Talk Live. It's been a very interesting discussion. I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope the listeners as well have learned a lot. And don't forget to go to their respective websites to get more information on AimPoint and also the James Kyle Golf Academy. Guys, thanks again, and I look forward to hopefully having you join me again on a future show.
Great. Thanks a lot.
Ted.
All right. Have a great weekend, guys.
You too. Thank you. Good night.
Good night. All right, it was my very, my very special guests, James Kyle and Mark Sweeney. Mark, of course, the founder and CEO of AimPoint, and James is also a certified instructor of AimPoint and a PGA professional and owner of the James Kyle Golf Academy. Again, make sure you visit both of their respective websites and to learn more and gain more information. But I want to one more time just thank the Coach's Corner panel, Paul Kaster, Mike Fay, and Bill Abrams, for doing such a great job tonight on the panel. And hopefully if you tune into the second half of the show, you learned a little bit about AimPoint and the system as well. Thanks, guys, for doing a great job. But most importantly, thank the listeners out there worldwide for faithfully tuning in each and every week here on Golf Talk Live. We certainly enjoy bringing a lot of highly talented coaches, teacher professionals, authors, and of course, entrepreneurs that have stopped by over the last several years. And it's really I can't emphasize enough, it's really through their participation and guest appearances that help make Golf Talk Live a first-class show. A special thank you to some of the sponsors and supporters of the show. Jonathan Laird from South Coast Golf Guide. Go to southcoastgolfguide.com to learn more about the guide. Meredith Kirk, go to meredithkirk.com. She's a great teacher professional in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Nikki and Tiffany Litherland, thank you for your support. Mr. Bernie Pinder from Ontic Golf. Sean Kelly, owner of linkedgolfers.com, and of course, Mr. Peter Doyle from Doyle Golf Solutions over in Ireland. Thank you for all your continued support and well wishes of the show. On that note, everybody, I will see you next Thursday right here on Golf Talk Live. God bless everybody and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.